I'm going to tell you the story of how they discovered and what they discovered about the Amesbury Archer. Now this is Salisbury Museum. Not far from Salisbury is the town of Amesbury, and Amesbury, of course, is very close to a very famous World Heritage Site called Stonehenge. Now then, in Amesbury for the last, well, quite a few years now, they've been building lots and lots of houses. When they build lots and lots of houses, of course, lots of families move to the area, they need another school. So they were building another school on a green field. It was just a green, grassy farmer's field that the building people had bought, and they were going to turn into a school. That's all good. But we mentioned the World Heritage Site. They knew, the planners knew, that if they dug in the field, they would probably find some archaeology, because everywhere all around Stonehenge, as far as you can see, if you stand at Stonehenge and look out away from Stonehenge, as far as you can see is archaeology. All of those lumps and bumps, and then the things you can't really guess, the things that are not under lumps and bumps, the hidden things, there's archaeology all over the area. So the planners, the builders who wanted to build the school, thought, right, when we start digging, we might find some archaeology. So they had to have a watching brief. A watching brief is where the archaeologists work with the builders. And so they began, and they started clearing the earthworks, moving the soil off the great big field so they could start building, moving it off, and then every time they saw something, the builders would stop and they'd say, and the archaeologists would come across, and they would very carefully look, very carefully move all the earth, and they'd find what it was. If it's rubbish, throw it away. If it's archaeology, very carefully clean it and record it where it is, photograph it, and then really carefully lift it up, put it into boxes, and then it gets taken away and looked at, and they study it, and quite often, usually, it ends up in the museum. Now then, they had been doing this for quite some time in the field where they were planning to build a school. What they were finding was a lot of Roman. It's near Stonehenge, which is Stone Age, but they were finding Roman things as well, because people for all the history had been coming around the area around Stonehenge, and the Romans had, and they had been burying some Roman people there. So they're finding Roman people, so that's very good. What I should mention is, it was the week before the bank holiday. This is a very important piece for later on in the story. So, they're working, finding lots and lots of Roman, and then on the Friday they decided, right, okay, let's do that final piece in the corner over there, right over there. There's a little bit of a bump, so maybe we'll find some more Roman. That's what they're thinking. The builders drive in for their digger, scrape back the soil, and yeah, there's something, a little piece of bone. Aha! So, the archaeologists come in with a trowel and a brush, very, very careful, clear. They look at the bone. It could have been, maybe the farmer many, many years ago had buried a cow there, or maybe somebody buried their dog there, something like that. No, the archaeologists very, very carefully looking at the bones, and because they're all trained, they looked at the bones and they thought, no, that's human bones. Aha! So of course, they're all thinking, we found Romans earlier on in the week, this is probably another Roman. They carried on digging. Next they're looking at the bones, they're thinking, these are quite big bones. This is not a child, this is an adult. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, carried on digging. This is the Friday, remember the Friday. Then they found a pot. Now this was a big clue, a really big clue, because, as I say, these archaeologists were trained, they know what they're looking at. They looked at the pot, and the pots were broken, but they could work out that the pots were that shape. And they thought, that's not Roman, that's, hang on a minute, and let's look at the pattern, the ziggy-zaggy little pattern on the pottery. That's beaker, that's before the Romans. Oh, that's interesting. So, they carried on working, and they found one pot with some bones, and they're thinking, okay, it's a beaker burial. That's very interesting, because we normally, if we find a beaker burial, and it's somebody important, we find one pot and the skeleton and maybe a little stone tool or something with it, and that's it. Okay. And they carried on digging, and they kept finding little stones, and they're about this big, and they look like little duck's feet. So they're pointy and they go down, and then there's ziggy-zaggy bits at the bottom. And they knew that those were arrowheads. And they found one, and then two, and then three. By the time they finished digging, they found 18 of these little arrowheads. And as they carried on digging, they kept on finding more stone tools, tools that were made out of stones, like little round scrapers or little knives for cutting. So that's really interesting. They carried on cleaning, they carried on cleaning. They found their one pot. They're thinking this is possibly a beaker barrow. We think so, yeah. They found a second pot. How unusual. We've never found two pots in a beaker barrow before. Maybe, perhaps there was a mistake. They buried the body and they put a pot in and then they went for lunch. Don't know. And then they came back and they said, did we put a pot in? Can't remember. Maybe we should put another pot in just in case. So the archaeologist was thinking maybe that was the case, maybe it was a mistake, maybe it's not supposed to be two pots, don't know. Anyway, it's Friday, I mentioned that, didn't I? I did. So we're up to lunchtime on Friday now, working away, and they're finding lots and lots, and they'd love to go really quickly, to really pull out lots of things very quickly, but they're proper archaeologists, so they're working very slowly. So they're working very thoroughly, very carefully. They found two pots. They're very carefully digging through. And they're quite excited because they're finding a lot of little stone tools with this skeleton. And they revealed the skeleton. They've dug, and it's quite a long skeleton. So they're looking at it and they're thinking, "Oh, it's an adult. That's exciting." And then they're digging. No, they cannot believe it. They look into the ground, and there is a third pot. They discovered a third pot in the ground. Could not believe it. Obviously it's a bit broken because it's been in the ground for a long time. We haven't worked out how long yet. But there's a third pot in the ground and I'm thinking, okay, this wasn't a mistake. There wasn't accidentally a second pot in the ground. There is actually supposed to be, on purpose, 3 pots in the ground. They're very excited. It's now after lunch, mid-afternoon. They'd love to speed up a bit, but they can't speed up a bit because they've got to do this properly because they're proper archaeologists. So they carry on digging, and they're digging really, really carefully. And then something colourful pops out of the ground. They can see it, and it's green. It's not grass or anything because it's a slightly different colour, and it's quite a lovely colour. And look at it, and they very carefully, with a little brush, very carefully reveal it with a little brush. And there it is, and they look at it and they think, oh, we know what that is. It's a funny diamond shape, quite small. They look at it and they think, oh, that's metal. What kind of metal goes green when it goes rusty? They knew it. Copper. It's a little copper knife. It's got a handle missing, but what they found was just a little copper knife. So what happened to the handle? Maybe it was made of wood, something like that. What happens to wood after a long time when it's been in the ground? So they carry on digging, and they think, wow, this is really nice. So we found one little copper knife, and they carry on digging, and then again, another little piece of green pops up out of the mud. Very carefully clean it, slightly different size, but another copper knife. Whoa, okay, this is an amazing grave. These archaeologists are very excited. The time, we've gone on, it's past mid-afternoon on the Friday now, we're going towards the evening. Do you think when it gets to the dinner time, they're going to just put everything down and walk away? No. This is one of the most exciting things they've ever done, so they're just going to carry on going. It's nearly the weekend, nearly the bank holiday weekend, but they're not going to go, they're going to carry on working. That's what they're doing, they're carrying on working. So they carry on digging, and then, unbelievable. Now this time, really quite broken, but they're looking at the bits, they're thinking, yeah, it's definitely it. 4 pots, or broken pots. They found 4 pots with this pair. Unbelievable. They carry on digging. Very, very carefully. Time is ticking on now, it's past dinner time. The sun is beginning to go down. Are they going to walk away and just leave it all? Absolutely not, no way. Carry on working. Carry on digging. And then, another little colour out of the mud. And it's that green colour again. So that's 3 copper knives they've seen in the ground. Very, very carefully clean it with a little brush. Very, very carefully. Record where it is, put it in the box, keep it really, really safe. And then working and then working and working. And then somebody says, you're not going to believe this. What? 5 pots. Unbelievable. You normally find 1 pot. 2 pots was exceptional. 3 pots was incredible. We've now gone to 5 pots. What is that? That's just amazing. So they're so excited about what they found. but they still have to work steadily and methodically, very carefully. And the sun is really going down now, and they're thinking, what should we do? We're not ready to work in the dark. So, one of them has an idea, I'll go get my car. So they get the car, and the car drives across the field, and they park the car next to the hole that they created because they're digging up the skeleton. And they leave the engine running, so the battery doesn't go flat, and they leave the lights on, so they're working underneath the car lights. There's a car sitting there working, and the lights are on, and they're working, and the sun's gone, pretty much gone right down now. It's dark now, but they're still working, and they're working as carefully as they can. And they're digging and they're working, and they're very, very carefully working. And then, something really shiny, not green, but shiny, and it's tiny, shines in the mud. What is that? So out comes a little brush. Oh, no! And they look really carefully. Oh, wow, that's amazing. It's gold. Because did you know that when gold is buried in the ground, it doesn't go rusty, it gets dirty, but it doesn't really change. It's very shiny. So with a little brush on it, it comes up shiny. They found this tiny piece of gold, and they looked at it very carefully. It had little dents in it. It's not just a little lump of gold like you'd find that nature's dropped in the ground, because nature produces gold and just leaves it lying around in places like Wales. No, this piece of gold somebody has done things with it and knocked little holes in it, little dents in it, and they've actually made it into something very, very thin as paper, and rolled it up. So thin that when the archaeologists went to pick it up, they accidentally bent it a little bit, so they realised we've got to be really, really carefully, and they picked it up and they put it into a box really, really delicately. And then they're still digging, and it's dark now, and there's the car light shining onto where they're working, and they're working with a brush very, very carefully. And then, somebody says, what's that? And again, they look into the mud really carefully. Tiny little thing shining in the ground. It's another piece of gold. They look very, very carefully into the ground. And there it is. And it's just like the first one they found. Exactly the same design, the same shape, very thin, very shiny. So again, clean it with a brush. Very carefully pick it up, put it into a little box, keep it very, very safe. And they're working on their. So what they have to do as archaeologists, they have to reveal the whole grave where the person was buried, all the skeleton on all of the things, and they take photographs, and they do very, very careful drawings of where everything is. Is that next to that? Is that next to that? Record the whole thing. And then, you know, the time's been ticking on. Have we gone into darkness now? It was gone midnight. So we've gone into Saturday now. And they very carefully, they pick up the pieces, one by one, and they put them into boxes, probably with tissue paper so they don't rattle about in the boxes. Everything, every little bone from the body, every little thing, every little stone tool, all the pieces of the pots, all have to be picked up and put into special individual boxes and carefully put into the car. And then it was gone past 2 o'clock in the morning. They were able to say, okay, that is everything out of the ground, and now we can take it back to the office and lock it up in the office and leave it for the bank holiday weekend, ready to come back on Tuesday after the holiday. On the Tuesday, they all rush back into the office, really, really keen to see what's what. First of all, an archaeologist, a special archaeologist, she's called an osteoarchaeologist. That means osteo means bones, so she's a bone specialist. She got every single bone from the skeleton that they found, and she laid it out on a table. That means she can look at it and find out things about this person who died a long, long time ago. So first of all, looked at it. It's a very big skeleton. It's an adult. And secondly, she looked at it, and there's a few things that she learned that told her that it was a man. One of the things is looking at his head is an experiment for you. Do this, and then do this on the eyebrow. If you wiggle, if you're a boy and you're wiggling your finger on your eyebrow there, you can feel a bump. Okay? If you're a girl and you're doing that on the eyebrow, you can't feel a bump. Because boys, we've all got lumps there on the eyebrow, and ladies usually have a very smooth forehead and no bump there. That's one of the ways that they turn. Looking at the skeleton, you can tell, is it a boy or is it a girl? So she knew that, so okay, it's a man, because it's a long skeleton, it's a man. And then she carried on looking. She looked for, one of the things she carried to look for, how did he die? Was he in a big battle? if he was in a big battle, there would maybe be lots of fighting with sharp things, and when a sharp, this is a little bit horrible history, this one, a bit horrible, but when there's a sharp thing, it goes whack on the body, it goes through the skin, and it hits the bone, and it will leave a little line on the bone. So she's looking for lines on the bones. Didn't see any, none at all. She looked, checked the whole skeleton, nothing. That means that it did not die in a battle or a fight or a murder, none of that. So she kept looking, and she looks at the feet and the legs and the ribs and all that kind of thing. Now looking for disease, because sometimes diseases can affect bones, and sometimes a very clever osteoarchaeologist can look at the bones and work out, did the person die from a disease? Looking at all the bones, particularly the joints, where the bones join together, looking for something that shows the disease. Got to the head, and underneath the tooth was a little hole. She said, aha, that could be it. What happens is, sometimes you get an infection in your jaw. Humans and animals get this, and it can get very, very painful. Today, we'd go to the dentist, and the dentist would give you some medicine, and it's gone. But this is from a long, long time ago. No dentists. So this person had this little infection, and the little infection got worse and worse and worse. And eventually, you think, this little infection here, because your blood goes all the way around your body, the blood that was going around the head picked up the nasty infection here, took it around the rest of the body, and made the person very sick and may have killed the person. We think that's how this person may have died. Then, how old is the person, or was the person when they died? So by looking at all the joints there, the joints there, the osteoarchaeologist can work out how worn out is the person. Because if you think about it, if somebody has been walking around for 90 years, all of their joints are going to be quite worn out. You're probably school age, so you're probably quite young, and you haven't been walking around for 90 years, so all of your joints are fresh and they're not worn out. So she looked at all the joints on this skeleton and worked out how worn out they were, and she's guessed that when he died, he was between 35 and 45 years old. Now, for somebody way back in history, that's quite an old age, because people didn't used to live as long as they do today. So quite an old person, really. So a tall man with toothache that may have killed him, aged between 35 to 45, so quite old. So quite interesting so far. Then, one more thing. Looked at all the bones again, and looked at the legs. One of the legs, yeah, good strong bones, and there's the knee there, and a good strong bone. Looked at the other leg, not so strong, and then, oh, the kneecap is missing. And looking at the bones, our clever osteoarchaeologist works out that one leg, had the knee bone missing for quite a long time. So this person had been walking around with only one good leg for most of his life. What else do they? Then it's time to use the clever machines. We want to know, when was this person alive? So we've got a little carbon dating machine, very clever. And they take a little piece of bone, tiny little piece of bone, and they put it in this machine. And this machine goes, it's very, very clever, and works out how long ago did this person die. This machine can do that just by looking at bones. It can do it for humans and it can do it for animals. Very, very clever. This machine looked at the age of the bones and worked out that this person had been alive 4,300 years ago. Whoa, that's a long time, you know. And then the osteoarchaeologist told everybody about 4,300 years ago, and they went, hang on a minute, there's something wrong with that. Because they looked at their history books and they remembered what they learned, and they looked at it and they thought, but we found 3 pieces of copper and 2 pieces of gold. Both of those things are metals. And they were looking at the timeline of history, and they realised that 4,300 years ago was the end of the Stone Age. So this person shouldn't really have metal. And then somebody remembered, there was something else we found in the grave. We didn't really think much of it at the time, but it's very important now. A little black stone. that little black stone they've seen them before is a fettling stone or a cushion stone, and it's for when somebody makes metal. Have you ever seen it on television? They get metal and they heat it up and it turns into a liquid, and then they pour it into a mould. Shh, it's this liquid, and it pours into the mould, and it takes the shape of the mould, and then you have to wait for it to cool off. It takes a while, and when it cools off, you break open the mould, and out comes your metal shape. Have you seen that on television before? Well, the little black stone, when you take your new metal out of your mould, the little black stone is for rubbing your new piece of metal against to make sure it's the right shape. Because when it comes out of the mould, sometimes it's got a rough edge on it, and you need to get rid of the rough edge with the black stone. So that's what the black stone's for. So, this person was alive in the Stone Age. This person had some metal with them, and also had some metal tools with them for making metal. This person lived in the Stone Age and knew how to make metal. Wow, okay, that's pretty amazing. And now they're thinking, do you remember the 5 pots? They're thinking, well, maybe that's why this person had the 5 pots, because this person knew about metal. So one more question that they asked the scientists. Where did he come from? For this, it's another machine. They took a piece of the tooth this time, a very tiny piece of tooth, and they put in another machine. And this tells you what is the tooth made of. Funny question, but all of our bones and our teeth are made of rocks. Where do we get those from? We get those from every time you have a drink, or every time you eat a plant, a little piece of the rock that water or those plants were growing in goes into the plant, goes into the water. And so when you drink the water, you're drinking a little piece of the rock, of the ground where the water came from, just a tiny bit. And actually, it's good for you because it goes into your body and becomes your bones. It goes into your teeth and becomes your teeth. So what this clever machine does is it looks at the teeth and it very, very cleverly works out what kind of rock made up the teeth. And then it can tell you exactly what kind of rock. So the next thing is, they take the rock, they know what kind of rock it is, and they take a very clever map which tells you all the different types of rock all over the world. First of all, it's the Amesbury Archer. So we look at the Amesbury map. Is the rock from Amesbury? No, it wasn't. So that means that when he was growing up, and when his teeth were being made, when he was drinking water and eating vegetables, the rock that he was eating was not from Amesbury. He was not growing up in Amesbury. So they looked at another map, the south of England somewhere. So we're looking at the map which tells us which rocks have gone into making his teeth. Where was he growing up? Where was he drinking and eating? And where was he growing? Where were his teeth growing? So we've looked at South of England map. No. So we've got out the European map. But France, did he grow up in France? No. They looked at even further away, even further away. Eventually, he spotted it. The rock that was coming into the water that he was drinking when he was young, when he was growing up, was from the Alps and round about Switzerland. What's now Switzerland? So they're thinking, whoa, that's really impressive. Wow, he's not from around here, he's come a long, long way. And then somebody said, yeah, but that was at the end of the Stone Age, and so he would have had to walk a long way. And remember the legs? So he's walking all the way from Switzerland with only one good leg. That's pretty amazing. Why was he walking all that way? We think because around about the time that he died, think about the Stonehenge timeline, we think that's when Stonehenge was really at its most impressive. They were building the last, final, impressive part of Stonehenge. And we think that word of Stonehenge had spread all across Europe. And he decided, right, I'm going to go there. That sounds like the place to be. And maybe when he was growing up in Switzerland, maybe somehow he had found out how to make metal, how to get the rocks and heat them up, mix them together and pour them into a mould and make a knife. How to do that. And maybe he had decided, I am going to walk all the way from Switzerland with my bad leg all the way to this place called Stonehenge, and I'm going to show everyone. Can you imagine? He arrived at Stonehenge and he said, look at this. And he made a fire and he mixed some rocks together and they melted, and then he poured them into a mould, and then he waited for it to cool off. And then he took it out and then he polished it up on his black polishing stone, And he went, look, you've got your Stone Age knives, they're very good, but this one is metal, this one's much better. And they all said, wow, you are amazing. And we think he lived around Stonehenge, around Amesbury for a while, before he died. And then when he died, we think, because everybody was so impressed with his knowledge, such a clever man, we think that's why they buried him with, what was it? 5 pots, 3 copper knives, 2 little pieces of gold ornament. We think maybe they were wrapped in his hair, possibly, we don't know. And then there are these little arrowheads, there were 18 of those, and there were over 100 little stone tools, all in his grave. And that's what the archaeologists found, and that's how they discovered the Amesbury Archer.